Hello, everybody, and welcome to Red Wings Daily, presented to you by FanArch. I'm your host, Kirk MckNight, author of The Voices of Hockey. Broadcasters reflect on the fastest game on earth, which I will just mention is available on Audible and on Apple Books in audio format. I'm coming to you from the southwest corner of Washington State, 2,454 miles from Little Caesars Arena. Now, the Red Wings were not in action last night at LCA, nor will they be tonight. They're on the road for 3 straight, starting tomorrow night in Scotiabank Arena in Toronto to take on the Maple Leafs. This will be the 4th and final regular season meeting between the two. Who knows if they'll meet in the playoffs? Who knows if they'll make the playoffs? I kind of feel like one of them will. I kind of feel like it's going to be the Red Wings. But this will be the first game back for the Toronto Maple Leafs. The fans are going to be with some greedy, outstretched hands, thankful for their team to be back. So it might be a kind of a mental thing for the Red Wings going into this game to overcome that crowd and to overcome a team that might be a little hungry from their West Coast trip and trying to give their fans something to cheer about. But seeing as how there wasn't a game to recall from last night, nor a game to prep for tonight, we're going to delve into our segments that we used to be kind of like fillers in these moments where we're in between Red Wings action. But this is one of my favorite segments, and it's Tantrum Tuesday. And the hockey gods shined upon me last night by providing this one. It's in the San Jose Sharks Florida Panthers game last night. We had a goalie fight. It doesn't happen too often. So anytime that happens, you know that's got to be the topic of the day for Tantrum Tuesday. Now, setting up the story, it was Matthew Tkachuk's first game back from his torn abductor muscle, which sounds more like an answer in Mad Libs. Noun, torn abductor muscle. I don't think I have anything besides that. But having that known, Desjardins, no, not Desjardins. See, I'm going to say his name wrong. I knew I was going to say his name wrong, but Descharnais for San Jose stood up Matthew Tkachuk pretty hard as he was skating up the ice. Basically lowered his shoulder, got him around the lower body, not lower body, but lower stomach region, his basically in the breadbasket. Knocked the wind out of him, sure. I mean, he skated off on his own power, but the fans did not like it. They were giving Descharnais pretty much hell for it. And I guess the Panthers themselves were biding their time for the right moment. And that came in the third period. They were down 3-1 at the time. Rodriguez, this is deep in the San Jose zone. Descharnais is going after somebody else. Somebody gets tripped a little bit in front of him, but here comes Rodriguez and just boards Descharnais like hard into the glass. Of course, the fans loved it. This game took place in Sunrise. So, it's a homecoming for Matthew Tkachuk. He gets leveled pretty hard. He still played in the game. I don't think he was taken out because of it, but once Rodriguez took that shot into Descharnais, everybody knew that was kind of like, okay, this is the unspoken rule. You have what you got coming, so it's kind of foreseeable. So we all know when that action is taking place, they're making a statement. Well, the goaltender for San Jose, Nedeljkovic, made his own statement and came out of his crease, go behind the goal. This is all happening like maybe 5 or 10 feet from. This is, like I said, this is deep in the San Jose zone. So Nedeljkovic goes out of his crease, starts going after Rodriguez and starts laying some punches at him. So I'm going to pause, and we're going to go back in time to the first time I ever noticed or witnessed something like this in real life. I was in Las Vegas. This was the second year of the Las Vegas Thunder. This is back when I was like 15 or 16 years old. This is the mid-'90s. It is the Las Vegas Thunder, and their goaltender was Clint Malarchuk, who used to play in the NHL, got a really horrific injury, almost lost his life. Puck basically cut his throat wide open. I think that's one of those rule-inducing kind of moments in hockey history, and that's why you see those throat guards on those on hockey players today. So Malarchuk, tough as nails, basically continues his career down the road in the IHL playing for the Las Vegas Thunder. And what had happened was there was a line brawl basically on the other end of the ice. And at this point, the goaltender was starting to get into it and throwing a couple punches on his own. So here's Malarchuk 200 feet away and having nothing of that. And he started skating up the ice. The crowd is just raucous by this time, knowing that he's about to get into it, knowing how tough he is, and he took it to the goaltender. So that was when I learned that unspoken rule of as soon as a goaltender basically lays a hand on one of your players, especially deep in their zone where they feel like they're safe enough because you're 200 feet away, that is when you spring into action. So that is exactly what happened last night. Nedeljkovic started going after Rodriguez. So Sergei Bobrovsky basically has 200 feet to decide how he's going to do it, and we already know the why. And so he's got to figure out how he's going to take him down and what he's going to do it. So, I mean, he loses the stick around the blue line. He throws his gloves down, goes right after it. Crowd is just obviously cheering. This is their guy. He's won the Stanley Cup the last 2 seasons for him. So this is their guy going at it and really, giving the crowd exactly what they want and throwing a few punches. So it was a pretty decent fight for a goalie fight. It wasn't necessarily Vernon Waugh in 97, but it was still entertainment. It was great theater, and it was good enough for Tantrum Tuesday. So I'm going to applaud Bobrovsky, and I'm going to applaud Nedeljkovic too, because, I mean, he was standing up for his teammates just the same. It's just that there is that unspoken rule. So if you're going to go after somebody, especially if you're punching with your gloves, those gloves are tough as nails, folks. Those things are like they're like baskets. You're basically going after a guy with your gloves on. Sergei was having nothing to do with that, and he wasn't even going to go after Nedeljkovic with his gloves on. He was going to go with him with a fist. He meant business in that situation. So that's been Tantrum Tuesday. It was a beautiful one. I invite you guys to get on YouTube and look that up. It's a pretty good fight, and I believe, I'm not sure who was calling that on the broadcast. I mean, if it was the TV broadcast, it would have been Randy Hahn for the Sharks, and if it were the Florida TV broadcast, it would have been Randy Moeller and Steve Goldstein. Both broadcasters, all 3 of those broadcasters actually are featured in the Voices of Hockey. Yet another plug. So it was a great night for theater and fighting. Seeing 2 goaltenders go at it is always going to be great. Great entertainment in hockey. So speaking of the Sharks, they won 4-1 against Florida, so they ruined Matthew Tkachuk's homecoming. It was a big day for San Jose. They're sitting at this 8th seed right now in the West, and they decided, instead of waiting to see if somebody else does something, they decided to pull the trigger themselves. They gained 2 points with that win, so they're only a point back of the 7th seed in the West. But they made a move. They went after Kiefer Sherwood from Vancouver, who was one of the more sought-after players. The Golden Knights on Sunday, I believe it was, went after Rasmus Anderson and got him in their lineup, and now San Jose did their part. These guys really aren't giving up that much players, personnel to get some of these players. The Golden Knights gave up Zach Whitecloud, Abram Scheib, and a couple of draft picks. Vancouver basically giving Kiefer Sherwood to San Jose only got in return AHL defenseman Cole Clayton from San Jose's farm system and 2 second-round picks, a second-round pick in this year's draft and a second-round pick in next year's draft. All this to get Kiefer Sherwood, a player that was sought after, like I mentioned. So speaking of him, this is going to be his 5th NHL team. This is his 8th season. He's played with the Ducks. He's played with the Avalanche, the Predators. We saw he play with the Canucks, obviously, and now he's here with San Jose. He's got 60 goals and 61 assists. Last season, he laid down 462 hits. So, Descharnay, you got somebody else to help you with these hits. And I guess, forget Descharnay. How about Nedeljkovic? You got somebody else to start laying some hits for you, too. Maybe you don't have to always get involved in the fights. But obviously an upgrade for San Jose to pick this guy up. He was... They didn't have to give away much for that. Second round picks, obviously, that's questionable. You don't want to give away first round picks, obviously, too much, or you don't want to give too many of them away. I feel like they did a great job in what they were able to give and to get. I think Vancouver was ready to take that off their market cap and ready to make some deals and ready to kind of just start preparing for next season. They're last in the Pacific, so I think they're really starting to just pack up their tent as far as sales go, at least selling themselves as a viable team and really opening up the sailors market as far as what they're selling off and not necessarily tickets but personnel. These metaphors really aren't matching up very well, but you'll start to see what's happening. We've seen 2 teams in the Pacific basically not giving up or you're basically gaining not too much to give up some. And that's Calgary with Rasmus, and then that's Vancouver with Sherwood. So we'll see. There's basically the trade freeze here coming up in a couple of weeks before they go to the Olympics, and then the deadline's in early March. We're going to see a lot more people making some moves to get some players, but like I said, the Sharks kind of made their move before they waited too long. Sometimes you don't want to wait too long, and that's exactly what they did not do. They made the right move at the right time. So they're really going to make a move here coming into the last 40% of the season here. Now, yes, we are going to talk about Red Wings today. Don't worry, folks. This will be our first mention, basically, of anything. This first segment focusing on the Red Wings. Just talking about JT Compher. JT scored a goal against San Jose Friday night. He's 10th in the team in scoring. So that's nothing to be ashamed of. 10th is, as widespread as the scoring is on this team right now, to be 10th, especially when you consider who's up in the top 5 or 6, sitting there at 10th ain't bad. Basically on the season, he's got 6 goals and 11 assists. He's the third line center. He's out there with on the second power play unit with Kaner and the 2 rooks, Axel and Finns, and then he's also out there with Kopp on that second power play unit. So don't want to take away from what he does. He's getting what he needs to get done. He's not putting up numbers. He's not putting up DeBrincat or Raymond numbers, or even Larkin or Seider or JVR or Kaner, but he's contributing, and he's out there trying to get things done on that second minute of the power play. He's out there trying to feed Kane, or trying to be fed by Kane and the 2 rookies, and those guys are making points. Sometimes the power play scoring we get doesn't necessarily have to happen with Larkins, Raymond, and Seider and DeBrincat. Sometimes it happens on the other side of it. So I don't ever undervalue these players for what they do and what they can bring to the team, no matter where they're sitting on the scoring spectrum, because any given day that ends in Y, you may have a new hero, and we've had plenty of heroes this season. We've obviously had some of the same names and familiar names. DeBrincat had the game winner in overtime the other night, so obviously that's going to be one that's kind of the familiar call, the familiar goal scored by Ken Daniels on the call or Ken Cowell on the radio call. But still, I don't ever want to leave out any players who I feel can always contribute. And Compher proved the other night, in his goal that was set up by Kopp, I believe, scored. And he's really hasn't scored a lot in the last few games. I think that was his first goal in a few, but I always like to say these guys are due, and I always like to be right about it. And a lot of people like to say, you called it, and I like to hear that too. So we'll see how things unravel for Compher in the next game when they take on Toronto. Closing out today's game, or today's show, we're just going to talk about the Atlantic Division. We call it Atlantic Idle because there were 5 teams that were idle yesterday. Not really much movements were made. Basically, all 3 of the teams that were in action from the Atlantic Division lost in regulation, so they didn't gain any ground. Buffalo lost, and they could have basically leapfrogged the idle Boston Bruins, but they didn't. Toronto really didn't change anything in their positioning or no, that's Toronto. No, Toronto could have basically moved up a little bit. It's Florida that could have, that really didn't change anything by losing in regulation. I think Toronto might have just inched a little bit closer to Boston and Buffalo if they had won last night, but they lost against Minnesota. Like I already mentioned, San Jose beat Florida. So regardless if Florida would have lost in overtime or even won in regulation, they would have still been sitting in 7th coming into today. There's going to be teams in action that are trying to gain a little bit more ground. Tampa Bay is going to be action while the Red Wings are idle, looking to get those 2 points back up on them and have that basically be alone on the top of the Atlantic Division, 2 points up on the Red Wings, or even 1 point up if they lose in overtime or in a shootout. Again, Montreal is going to try to gain a point or 2 and be back in the mix to be up in 2nd and try to be closer to Red Wings and see if they can inch a little bit in case the Red Wings fall over the next game or 2 and maybe they take over the 2nd spot. or even the first spot if Tampa Bay starts to lose a few and Montreal gets hot. So there's kind of a bottleneck in different parts of the Atlantic Division, but I like to say the Mid-Atlantic, and that's spots 4 through 7, really are tightened up quite a bit. There's 13 points between first and eighth, so it's still anybody's game. Ottawa, even Ottawa's, Ottawa could get really hot and try to get one of those wild card spots, but the parity in this league, I always talk about it, and there's just so much parity, even with 32 teams out there, especially with 32 teams out there, the parity that you see. So it's not quite the other divisions. Like the Central has quite a bit of a span between 1 and 8, obviously, because you got Colorado and you got Winnipeg having a nightmare season. And then the Pacific, with the Canucks and Calgary Flames really starting to peter off, that division is really going to be becoming a 6-game or 6-team race right now. Everybody's still kind of in it except for those two. Like I had mentioned before, you got the top 3, and then you got San Jose sitting in one of them. So you got 2 spots basically that might be jockeying for some playoff positioning come the next 30 or 40 games in the season to see who really gets in there, with the top 3 obviously getting the automatic bid, and seeing if they can take 1, if not 2, of those wild card spots for seeds 7 and 8 in the playoffs. Anyway, back to the Atlantic. We'll see a little bit more action tonight. There's several teams playing in the Atlantic while the Red Wings are still idle. So there may be a whole nother league to look into when they go to face off against Toronto on Wednesday night. But in the meantime, tomorrow we'll talk about the game that's coming up tomorrow night. But in the meantime, like I said, this has been Red Wings Daily. I'm your host, Kirk MckNight. Again, author of The Voices of Hockey, Broadcasters Reflect on the Fastest Game on Earth. We've been seeing a lot more subscribers coming in. So, folks, please continue to view, subscribe, like, comment, share, all of the above. Love your viewership and love your comments. So keep them coming. And LGRW from the PNW.